I'm Eric Loy, and welcome to Eric Loy Interviews. On this podcast, we talk with folks from the VTuber community on their channels, their talents, their stories, where they come from, and their plans for the future. We welcome Chet Spinnyeyes. Hi, Chet.
Hey everyone, nice to meet you. I'm Chet.
And please introduce yourself to everybody.
Yeah, hey, I'm Chet. I'm a coding VTuber. I stream myself trying coding interview questions, and I often challenge other VTubers to coding challenges.
So, what brought you to coding as something you wanted to do?
Oh, let's see. Well, I guess if we're not talking just VTubing and just in general. So in high school, I was actually really into computer animation, like Pixar style animations.
Oh,
A friend invited me to a hackathon where we made a game, and I found out that you can actually port animations and program them into, video games. And I was like, oh, this is super cool. I want to do more of this. And I started learning how to make games, made a whole bunch of my own, and then eventually through, encouragement of parents too, I went to school for computer science. And yeah, as for this particular coding channel, I was job searching and I needed a lot of motivation to,
yeah.
practice for coding interviews.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In coding interviews, basically they give you um, like small scale puzzle questions, and you had to do them in a certain amount of time. And I was not very good at that.
Oh,
And I got very nervous and um, like yeah, really in my head and didn't do well on those. So I
yeah.
used streaming myself coding as sort of a means of motivation to practice and get more used to coding under pressure.
Well, that's
Yeah.
cool. That's a great idea, actually, and get to have a little fun in the process too, and enjoy yourself while doing it. And when I was, it's 100 years ago when we were first starting with computing, I had
Mhm.
a Commodore 64, and
Commodore 64.
yeah, that's how old I am. And our school was one of the first in the area that had computers at all for the kids to work with. And lucky enough, the school had Apple IIs,
Oh,
which
no way.
yeah, and which by the way, the basic works the same as Apple II as you did on the Commodore. So I was programming all sorts of text-based things on the Commodore because trying to do anything with graphics on the Commodore would take forever. and
Mhm.
and I was just having so much fun just regular programming. That is not anywhere near what you're doing. that's on
I mean,
that's like
it
bashing
might
rocks
be
together.
actually.
It's like bashing rocks together in comparison to what you're doing. I imagine there's things that took me hundreds of lines of here to and all sorts of different flips and flops to get done that you can get done with a single line in these days. It's
Dang.
and but it when I printed it out, it was almost an inch thick. The program I was using, um, I enjoyed it, but nothing like today. I imagine that you could do something like I did in 5 minutes.
Wow. I'm really not sure about that. I'm not too great at programming myself.
Mm,
But that's so cool. You programmed back in the day too.
well,
What? You said you made text-based stuff?
yeah. I wasn't very good with. We didn't really learn graphics. Then
Uh-huh.
we had just gotten the Apple IIs to start with, and I took it like a duck to water because I love that type of stuff. But
Hmm.
I didn't stay up with it. Um, and it was and I moved on to bigger computers then, and my mind got fuzzied trying to keep up with the stuff. Very basic computing, but it was fun back then. Um, and but what types of things are you coding now? Are types of coding problems? Am I missing the boat into what you're doing?
Oh, well, for the things I'm doing on stream, it's mostly coding interview questions, which are like just small scale puzzle questions.
Mm.
Um, let's see, they usually ask you to take some sort of data and then convert it into mm, or basically calculate exactly what they're looking for. It's not very like um, it's the problems aren't very complicated, I would say.
Hmm.
Um, again, they're only for coding interview questions. Um, let's see, but in my current job, I'm working with things like LLMs, AI, which I'm still not very good at. I'm
Hmm.
currently on the ramp up on my new job.
Right.
Hmm.
And it by coding thing, you're trying to solve with these things, solve questions, and are they comparing how you get to the result, or how quickly you get to the result, or both?
Oh, that's a really good question. Yeah, so there's ways to measure how efficient your code is.
Hmm.
Um, usually it's measured by how many, well, like how long your code takes to run or how many computational steps you do relative to the size of your input.
Mm.
So, um, ooh, that's a good question. How do I explain this? For example, there's things like O of n time, they say, where the question input is n
Hmm.
size long.
Yeah.
For example, you have a list of things, it's size n,
Right.
and the number of operations your code has to do is also n size, meaning it's proportional to the input. The
Mm.
amount of work you do is as large as your input, so it's considered, not a very bad efficiency code.
Yeah.
But, and then there's things like, I don't know, n squared time, where the amount of work your code does to arrive at the solution you know, is like an exponent proportion
Yeah.
to the input size.
Yeah.
So they do take those things into consideration, and also, of course, in interviews, how fast you do it also
Yeah.
is also important. They give you a time limit, usually, I don't know, 45 minutes to do one question or two questions, depending on which company you're interviewing at.
Yeah.
Usually, the more bigger and I don't know, coveted positions at big companies give you more challenging setups. Like maybe you have to do two hard questions in 45 minutes or something. Yeah,
Yeah.
the questions are segmented into like easy, medium, hards too.
Oh.
So
Yeah.
you'll see those as you interview.
That
Hmm.
that makes sense. That gives them an idea what level you are when you're coming in, and
Yeah, exactly.
and
Hmm.
I'm guessing that this type of position, these positions that you're talking about, um, while it's good to have the background and the education going in, it's still how
Hmm.
you use it and what you're able to do with it that makes the difference.
Mm, it's still, let me process that for a second. It's still what you do with your education, huh?
Mm.
I think, ironically, for a lot of coding interviews in software engineering, a lot of people say that the coding interview step usually has very little to do with the actual job.
Ah.
So you oftentimes you can be a really good engineer, like you can make things, like people are like, okay, make this program and you can do it really fast.
Hmm.
But if you're not good at specifically the problems they ask in coding interviews, like leak code questions
Hmm.
or system design questions, it's hard to get a job. So
Yeah.
people study specifically for passing coding interview questions like me. Um,
Even though you may not ever
yeah,
see that in the actual job.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of a really good like comparison.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you've heard of like math Olympiad or math contests.
I've
Usually those are like,
yeah.
yeah, usually those are like very puzzle oriented questions,
Right.
which are very tricky.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's either you know the solution or you don't because you've seen it in the past.
Hmm.
And you're not necessarily going to see this level of, this specific question in the real world. Is just like a brain teaser kind of thing.
Hmm.
I would say like leak code questions for coding interviews are kind of like that.
Hmm.
Oh, by the way, when I say leak code is a basically a popular site for practicing coding interviews.
Hmm.
It's like the most popular site.
Hmm.
That's why I say leak code.
Cool.
When I stream, I basically grind leak code in
Hmm.
interview questions. Mm.
Oh well, I mean that's a niche, but it's certainly one that not a lot of people are doing, and people who are interested in it would be really interested in learning how to do that type of stuff and applying it to real life situations. Um, I can imagine uh, two people going in for the same job interview, doing it two
Hmm.
different ways, and as far as passing the test goes, and not necessarily whether they get the job or not, it would
Hmm.
depend on how many lines of code did you have to use to do it, how quickly did you do it,
Mm.
and did you do it correctly? Because I mean, you could code something completely wrong and hand it to them and say, "I'm done," and all it does is basically spin around in a circle. So there, I imagine there's all
Yeah.
that to come, and they give you a time deadline too, which I imagine is pretty uh, nerve wracking when you have to sit there and do it in front
Oh
of
yeah.
people. Uh, It's
Yeah, it is really nerve-wracking. It's
then
part of the reason why yeah, oh, go ahead.
part of the reason why what?
Oh, it's part of the reason why I wanted to practice coding in front of people too, because I get really nervous in coding interviews. That was one of my big problems, and
Mm-hmm.
it was affecting my performance.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I thought
yeah.
streaming was a good solution to get myself practicing in front of other people and doing, coding battles with other VTubers. I mean, I swear, some of the coding battles I've done with other VTubers have been more stressful than any interviews I've ever done before.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Absolutely. Well, not only are you doing it for them, but you're doing it for an audience. They're coming to watch you do
Yeah.
it. That's a different story completely, rather than putting the job on the line. It's a different sort of pressure, maybe even more in some instances.
Mm.
I can
Yeah,
imagine
of course.
I can imagine going in there, and I'm talking about myself. If I had the
Hmm.
experience or the education going in, and somebody giving me a coding thing, and I could come out with 75 million lines of code, which still didn't quite get the job done. That's not going to get me a job, but it's it's pretty strange, I imagine, that comes out like that. Um, the it would be so much pressure on me to sit there and be waiting for that code to try and impress the boss.
It's like, wait, what programming language did you code with
Oh, I didn't
back when
code.
you were coding?
When I was coding, it was basic, basic, basic. it was
Oh, it's literally
it
basic.
was literally the basic, basic. No frills, and a lot of if then if uh, this then that, or if x equals 1 to 100, then those types of things. I used every variable possible in order to get this.
Wait,
It was actually a pro wrestling game, and
no way.
yeah,
You made a pro wrestling game?
I made a pro wrestling game, and it was all text based, and there were different abilities and different types of things involved, and
Whoa.
there was random things that could happen. I mean, a big guy wouldn't get picked up by a smaller guy, but a big guy wouldn't be jumping
Whoa.
across the ring. It was immense in size by the time I was done, um, and it had a timing mechanism in it that I figured out that the Commodore had its own timing in it, and I used that in the game. Um, the problem
Wow.
came in is in random numbers.
Uh-huh.
Um, the Commodore in the random number program did random numbers, but only in a certain pattern. So
Ah.
if you ran a program twice, you really had a good chance of it being the same thing over and over again. Um, there was
I
limits.
see.
I mean, it was it's like you never can tell if it's random because it's supposed to be random, but then you end up with the same random numbers over and over again. And then I imagine now, of course, you have so many different things to base it on. It would the stuff I did would be laughable and easy to program, and but it took me a long time. I wish I still had that
Wait, no, that's
printout.
actually really impressive.
Yeah.
Making a whole game like that in a, even if it's just a console, no graphics.
Oh yeah.
That
Yeah.
sounds like the features that you program sound really impressive,
It was,
even for
oh yeah,
today's standards, actually.
it was fun. I modified it to make it a tag team thing with two wrestlers in at a time, and random type stuff. It was a lot of fun. But by the time I
Hmm.
was done with it, so many more people had done better things, and with graphics and stuff. I'm like, okay, well, I'll just keep it for myself. Thank you very much. And I didn't go any further than that with it, unfortunately. But the concept of doing a battle against somebody else is really interesting to me. I mean, how many of them do you win?
Oh, it's a good question. I would say, ooh, some of them, I would say like 30% of them are wins.
Hmm.
The other 30% are ties. Wait, actually, yeah, it's pretty evenly distributed. 30% win, maybe 40% ties, and then
Hmm.
the rest are wins.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay, that's cool. I mean, oh, that makes it an even battle for the most part, anyway. Um, that you
yeah.
one side or the other. Now, have you gone into any of these battles with someone and
Hmm.
you've done your side, and then you look at and see what they've done, and it's completely different, but gets the same result?
Oh, ooh, that's a good question.
Mm.
I don't remember exactly, but let's see. Oh wait, hold on. Yes, actually, yes. Um, Actually, yeah, in coding, this is a common thing.
Hmm.
There's usually multiple approaches to solve the same problem.
Right.
Sometimes it's the same efficiency.
Hmm.
Sometimes there's differences in efficiency.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. Yeah, I think I can come up with a specific example. So I had a battle with a VTuber called Circuit Breaker.
Hmm.
She's an actual computer science major.
Yeah.
And I think she's like the second most scariest contestant I've had on just because she's so fast.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think at the time when I was battling her, so for context, how the battles work is that four lead code questions are randomly generated. Whoever does the most in 1 hour wins, basically.
Right.
And there's a live scoreboard and stuff.
Yeah.
So Circuit Breaker, she solved the first question in 5 minutes. For context, we have 1 hour to do all four questions. So I was like, wow, I'm so screwed. Uh,
No, no, no pressure at that point. Gee,
yeah, I
well,
think at one point I went down 2-0. She solved the first two in like 10 minutes or something.
oh,
Um, yeah, and later when we were discussing solutions later on, it turns out she was doing a strategy called brute force. I'm
mm,
not sure if you're familiar with that.
mm,
It's basically when you're intentionally not going for the most, well, efficient algorithm, but
mm,
you're going for the one that's, I guess, easy to implement,
mm,
but it doesn't run very efficiently.
mm,
And in some cases, this actually works because when the input size of the problem is really small, you can get away with inefficient solutions.
mm.
And I think she happened to spot that this was a good opportunity to do it. Um, and obviously, she added some small optimizations. So it's not just pure brute force, but semi brute force.
Yeah,
And I tried to do it the prettier, efficient way.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, yeah, it was the wrong decision. I could have gone with some brute forcing too.
now,
Mm,
now with an outcome like that, now while it's I and I'm shooting at random targets here because I'm not really I'm not up on what you're doing here, but I find it extremely interesting. You get
hmm.
if you end up with a solution like that where somebody uses that type of tactic and is able to code faster than you in this situation,
Yeah.
would it necessarily help them in an interview to do it that way? Because it doesn't seem overly efficient. And I would think efficient would be something that would be very important.
Mm, that's a really good question. In the context of these battles, it doesn't matter because the goal is whoever solves the most in 1 hour wins.
Hmm.
But in an actual interview, they want the more efficient solution.
Mm,
That's what's going to get you the job.
mm,
So, yeah, I've been in interviews where um, I've produced what I thought was the best solution that I could come up with, and they were like, "There's a more efficient solution. Can you find it?" And I
mm,
have to modify my code and try to increase my chances of impressing them.
yeah.
And yeah, sometimes Sometimes I see it, sometimes I don't.
Oh,
Um,
that's rough. That's
yeah, yeah,
that's pretty actually pretty ice cold when you think about it. Here, try it
it
again.
is.
Well, I remember
Try it again.
I remember I did a class back in college 100 years ago where it was a
Hmm.
business class, and we were interviewing. Not only were we doing interviews, we were interviewing other people, and mine was I was interviewing somebody for a journalism position, and
Hmm.
this fellow handed me the resume. You did the handshake garbage, and I looked at the resume and I handed it back to him, and I said, "This is how I got an A," because the coach, the teacher was as twisted as I was. The teacher says, I tell him, I said, look, I said, we're a small newspaper. We don't have a chance. We don't have a staff to hire extra editors. So our
Uh-huh.
reporters have to edit the things themselves. I said, here on your resume, I see at least 3 typographical errors. I said, while we're doing this interview, if you could go ahead and find those errors for me. And handed him back the
Wow.
paper, and he looked like I hit him with a large fish. he was
Whoa.
he was done for the rest of the thing, and I got a giant A written on my scoreboard. But that, I mean, I imagine there's interviewers who actually are mean enough to do things like that. But truly,
Hmm.
that does kind of reflect the if that's the business atmosphere, you need to know that going in, don't you?
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, yeah, I don't think you'll, for editing positions or like article writing positions, there's only a few people like that, right?
Hmm.
But I feel like for computer science jobs, like you'll find a lot more people who will tell you, well, they're almost required to tell you that your code isn't efficient enough. There's a better solution
Hmm.
since it's pretty, there's objective ways to measure how efficient your code is.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
mm, yeah.
I imagine so. I imagine so. It's still, I imagine if you're going in there and you do your best and you think you got it done, and somebody says do it better and hands it back to you, now
Oh
now
yeah.
the pressure has increased exponentially, and they go,
Oh yeah.
now I really got to show them I can do this right. Um, and and the spinny eyes get spinnier that, when that happens. Uh,
They do.
yes, it gets smaller and spinnier. Uh, the When you're in a situation like that and you are applying for a position, do you have an
Mhm.
idea when you come in what type of coding that they're looking for, or are you just kind of coming in with a general thought? Do you have to be agile enough to go on the fly?
Oh, that's a really good question. So, for more famous companies like FAANG companies like Google, Microsoft,
Hmm.
Amazon, they interview so much people that people have actually compiled like lists of questions that the companies ask,
Hmm.
and then they rank it based on the frequency,
Hmm.
based on the company. So you can go onto LeetCode.com and see like, okay, Google likes asking these questions, Microsoft likes asking these questions. So if you're interviewing for them, you can, focus on those questions
Hmm.
and like study specifically for that company.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, ironically, for smaller companies, it's a little tougher to prepare because there's no such, I don't know, like large volume of candidates who can compile such a list. So you just have to, you know, study what the statistically more popular questions are.
Yeah.
Um, let's see. Yeah, and then some companies they ask for like system design questions,
Oh.
which um, kind of different from lead coding, where they ask you to design a app on paper,
Mm.
basically draw out all the servers and all the different services they're connected to,
Right.
and then um, yeah, just map out the system architecture, basically the layout of all the servers that you're using. Um, yeah,
You say,
on the internet you can like look up. Maybe there's like some clues on what specific companies will ask, so
right.
you can actually prepare for it. Mhm.
Right. And does it matter what type of product they produce? What type of questions are? Are they general type
Oh,
questions for that type, and are they specialized for that type of industry?
mm, that's a good question. Um, Leet code questions usually no. They
Uh,
often you'll find their questions on Leet code. Often the company just go to Leet code and pull questions from there.
mm-hmm,
It's not specific to their product.
mm,
Um, Although of course, certain companies like asking specific types of questions. Like Google likes to ask, is notorious for asking really difficult questions
mm-hmm,
and selecting the problem categories that are really difficult.
yeah.
Um, but for the system design part, that's the part where it's more related to their product. I was actually interviewing for a banking company.
Uh-huh.
They asked me to design on paper, um, like a system to take a picture of a check and then deposit it and then update the customer information. So that's directly related to their product.
Wow.
And yeah,
So,
well, yeah, this is a big scale problem. So they don't ask you to code it out. They just ask you to draw out the solution since
ah,
the solution requires multiple computers, multiple servers.
right. I hope
That's
they.
the
I
point
hope.
of system design, I
I
believe.
hope they don't just steal those and have somebody else implement them. That.
Wait, I never thought about that. What if, holy, what if they're, wait, yeah, it would be so funny if these system design questions were actually just problems that stump them internally and they're like, okay, let's let's just get other engineers unpaid to
That's
come
right.
up with solutions and then we'll implement them.
That's right. And then we'll say the job is closed and they don't have to do anything. Oh man, that's see your
Wait, I
mind.
never thought about
Your,
that.
your mind isn't evil enough.
That's actually insane that you can think like
Yeah,
that.
I'm afraid that comes from a long line of evil. And unfortunately, well, fortunately for most people, I'm also lazy, so the evil and lazy cancel each other out, and I'm just left with frustrated designs. But really, it does seem like there's ways to get yourself in better shape for these types of interviews. And I would think that coding wars and contests like this really help keep you sharp as far as that goes. Have you found that?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Mm,
Um, yeah, for a lot of people can probably attest to this, but some people they spend like months just grinding leak coding questions every day.
hmm
Um, it's kind of like bodybuilding. You're only in shape for when when it actually matters, like when you're going to interviews,
Right.
and then when you're not interviewing, you just kind of don't do it as much, and your skills kind of in that area kind of deteriorate while you work on the actual job.
Yes.
But yeah, the coding battles do help. Um, yeah, it also adds a competition aspect, which adds even more pressure and on top of the time limit and also an audience watching. Yeah, and especially if the person is really good too that you're going up against,
Right.
the pressure is so high. Like in the case of Circuit Breaker, who was an actual CS major,
Yeah.
I think the most stressful opponent I went up against a real NASDAQ data analyst. His name was Nerino.
Oh my.
And then there was another person called Sunzalor, who
Yeah.
is a actual LLM engineer.
Yeah.
Mm,
Did you did you
yeah.
did you have your rear handed to you?
In the case of Sunzalor, yes, he beat me pretty badly. He was really, really fast at
Yeah.
his job. Um, Nerino, who was the NASDAQ data analyst, oh, I beat him both times, but I lost my sanity each time.
It's a
So
Pyrrhic victories.
in well, it's more like he tried battling me psychologically as well.
Ah.
So for context, in the first battle, I won against him. I solved more problems faster, basically.
Yeah.
So he challenged me to a rematch. And this time, his strategy was to basically pretend to not know how to do anything for most of the
Mm.
battle. So his score was just zero.
Yeah.
Um, so what he was actually doing was he was actually still doing the problems, but he was just submitting them at the last minute, like
Ah.
pressing the submit button.
Oh,
So
that's
it looked like he had just, yeah, it looked like he had zero the
uh,
entire time, zero of four. And then I looked at his score of zero the entire time and I was like, oh, I feel kind of bad. I don't want to go up 3-0 or 4-0. And then I started slowing down too. But
ah.
the real story was that he was actually like ahead of me slightly the entire time.
Uh,
Um,
you're just not
yeah.
evil enough. We gotta
Man, my chat tells me that sometimes. Like just submit.
we
But
had
yeah,
we
at the end it was so scary. At the end when he just started submitting, the status log was just like bam 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 bam
yeah
when all his submissions came in.
yeah like what? No, I was
Like,
like you were lulled into a false sense of security. That's what it was.
yeah, exactly. And
Well,
also a
it
sort of false sense of pity.
oh yes, absolutely. You got to be ruthless and evil in order to get through this world today. but
Uh,
but really though, it's great that you're able to do this and keep the skills honed, and not only for yourself but other people involved. Is it tougher for you in the competition going against somebody who is about equal to you as far as skill, or if you know
oh,
if you
about equal.
yeah if someone is obviously kind of new at it, and that's not
Hmm.
much of a competition usually. But if somebody is way up above you and they beat you, you're like, okay, well, I knew that was going to happen. But somebody who's about equal
Hmm.
to you, I imagine that's tougher.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the psychological aspect is, yeah, it's there. So for context, when we battle, there's a status log, right? It basically prints out every time someone succeeds in a problem or someone submits a problem.
Mm-hmm.
That status log is so stressful to look at.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever they submit, they're like, oh no, are they gonna get it? Are they gonna get it? And then you just like wait in fear
Mm-hmm.
and until like, is it gonna print out that they succeeded?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think it was like that for I think I recently battled a oh, I found it. It was a LEO satellite researcher. His name is Kami Creed.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we were pretty evenly matched during that. At one point, our the status log kind of like intertwined. Like it would say like I submitted, Kami Creed submitted, I succeeded, Kami Creed succeeded. Like we were solving the problems at the same time, neck and
Oh,
neck,
yeah,
and it was stressful to look at.
oh yeah, because
There is definitely a psychological aspect to that. Mm.
you're trying to put the pedal to the metal and speed up a little bit, but so are they, and now the pressure's building up on both sides for that competition one-on-one type of thing. Whereas if you're going
Hmm.
in for an interview, you don't really know what other everybody else has done, and you're just trying to do
Hmm.
the best to show them what you can do, and that's a
Mm.
sort of different type of pressure, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And also, when you feel the pressure, your code quality can go down.
Mm.
I
Yeah.
remember when I was doing it against Nerino, he, um, see, how do I say this? I was so stressed at the end when he submitted all of his submissions. We still had one each though.
Yeah.
So he ended up doing in like, I don't know, 15 lines of code. I produced my code out of sheer panic. It was like 80 lines of code or something, but it still worked, which is not ideal.
6 times the code to get it
Yeah, yeah, it was horrible.
done. You
But
do.
yeah, that's why I say some of these battles are actually more stressful than the actual interviews that I do in real life. So in
Yeah.
a way, it's really good preparation. Like no interview can ever phase me
Yeah.
after what Circuit Breaker or Near We Know does to me.
That's true. That's true. Now, and
Mhm.
I got one more question about the competition. Have you had
Yeah.
a situation where they've got a problem and there's only one way you can think of doing it, and you have a fairly long bit of code to do this, and you see
Hmm.
what the other person does, and they've got like 5 lines, and they do the same thing.
Oh. Mm. Let's see. I'm trying to think if I have a situation. Well, for context, I don't actually see what their solution is in the middle of the battle. It's always after the battle.
Right.
But
Right.
yeah, after the Nerino battle, the comparing the code I made out of panic versus the one that he did calmly,
Mm-hmm.
that was that was one of the situations.
Mm,
I think outside the battles though, it's a really common thing to compare your code when, practicing
right.
for interviews to other people. They post their solution online, and it's always really frustrating whenever you think you have a good solution that took 20 lines of code maybe,
Yeah.
and then you look at some other guy's solution and they optimize it to like one or two lines of code. Like there's people out there who are just that good. They know the
Yes,
nitty-gritty of every single of the specific coding language that they're in.
yes.
Um,
They're,
yeah, but
they're scary.
actually, um, yeah, they're scary. Well, the thing is, sometimes with these one or two line solutions, they're actually not, um, they actually wouldn't get you, well, give you an advantage for interviewing, I suppose, because at this point, the code is like unreadable.
Yeah,
Um, I think interviewers also care about readability. So you have to strike a balance between, you know, like efficiency of the code and also readability, 'cause since it's important for other engineers to be able to read the code and also iterate on top
yeah.
of it too.
I
Mm.
I imagine these job situations. You don't necessarily want one person to be the only one who knows what the code does. Um,
Yeah, exactly.
because that makes them very important, and they can do whatever they want, and they kind of
Well, yeah.
keep it hostage. It's a kind of a different way of what hackers do, I guess. I've got the code. You can't
Mm.
do anything about it. Um, so it's not just being the smartest guy in the room, but being also
Hmm.
the accessible guy in the room. You gotta
Yeah.
work well with others in the meantime.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, it's
another.
a feedback I've gotten on the code I write at work too, like
Yeah,
how to make it more readable so other people can also understand it
yeah,
and also work on it as well.
yeah.
Um, yeah.
Well, that's
So if I were to, yeah,
go ahead.
yeah, go ahead.
No, if you were to what?
Oh, I was saying, I think I'm gonna start to learn and be more evil now. If I were to write code that's like less readable,
Yeah,
it's gonna make me really difficult to fire
that's
because I'm
right.
the only one
That's right. And
who can work on
you come
that.
up with your own code for the code. throw, throw in some things that don't go anywhere just to confuse people. Why did they do this?
Wow.
That's the
Hmm.
random method. Throw in MacGuffins so they don't know what's going
Wow.
on. See,
Thanks for teaching me the evil ways,
see.
Eric.
Join us, Luke. Oh, yes. Again, my sloth cancels out my evil, which is always good for everybody. But that doesn't mean I can't pass it on. uh, Chet, you're a great guest, and I do appreciate you coming on. For folks who
Mhm.
want to check out what you're doing, you're up on YouTube, right?
Yeah, I am up. I
Yeah,
am Chet Spinnyeyes. I also have a Twitch,
yeah,
though I'm mainly on YouTube.
yeah.
That's where I also put out the edits for the coding battles.
Yes. All right. Well, we're going to have those links in the description for the interview. Chet, it's great meeting you, and I'm glad I was able to teach you the ways of the dark side.
Yes, I will apply it into my own life.
That's me, always making things worse wherever I go. Kind of a reverse Johnny Appleseed, I am. It's great meeting you, Chet. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me too. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Eric Loy Interviews. Join us again next time when we talk to another member of the always interesting VTuber community.